How's it going, Paul?
I'm doing fine. I'm doing fine. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty well.
You don't have your poster up anymore.
Yeah, I packed up all of my stuff. All my books are gone. I'm moving out of Indiana back to Miami in the upcoming next Friday.
Oh, okay. Wow.
Yeah, so I packed up a lot of my stuff. But
so just for the summer, or are you done with your studies in Indiana?
I finished my PhD,
okay.
and the money's gone, so I gotta get out of here.
So you're moving back to Miami with family, or you got a job, or what's happening?
So I'm waiting on a job that I applied for at the National Museum of Mathematics. I actually have talked to the guy who has the same job title, and he's been getting my application through. So I have someone on the inside. I'm really hoping I get that job. But yeah, I'm moving back home with my family where the rent is free.
Totally understand it.
Yeah.
So what's on your mind today? So see, it's fun because as these things develop, it's like first talk is kind of the story, and then second talk is kind of okay, what folks want to get into. So it's kind of fun the way this thing develops.
I really enjoy it. It's nice when you have repeat guests, and it was such a good feedback in the comments section that I saw that people got something out of this. So
you get stuff out of other people's conversations. Why wouldn't people get stuff out of yours? I mean, it's and again, I mean, this whole thing, I feel like, I honestly feel like YouTube should recognize, I don't want to, it sounds kind of weird, but I think these conversations are actually what YouTube should be about. Mm-hmm. Because there's no other medium that I know that could kind of do this. And YouTube is used in so many different ways, which is obviously a really cool thing. But just having people be able to have good conversations and share them, I think it's so really, really cool. So
you talked about this with someone else, that there's a difference when you can see the person. Podcasts are great, but this is way different.
Yes.
And it is helpful because on my YouTube channel, I started having 1 hour long conversations.
Really?
And it's blowing up way better than any of my other content. Not much. I mean, it's not getting crazy, but it does a lot better than my personal videos.
Well, it's funny because most of the one-on-one conversations you see on YouTube usually are surrounding a subject, and it's people with expertise or status. Mm-hmm. And what's really, so you don't have to pay money to talk to me. It's kind of a competition to get the slots a little bit. Getting a slot can be hard, but it's pretty much, people, I don't choose the list of people I talk to. The list develops just kind of out of there in the world. And I don't know, it's just really cool.
Yeah, it's great. Well, as you correctly guessed, I am here with a topic of conversation ready.
Okay.
What I want to do is I want to talk about conversion. And so I have four main, I've got some good notes here because I've been thinking about this for the weeks. So I want to talk about how did I convert? Why did I convert? What is the difference between converting versus being converted? And the whole key underlying part of this is conversion through admiration, which I think is also directing people's elephants, getting people's elephants to turn around. But you do that with admiration. So that's the underlying theme behind this. So I want to start off with my own list of conversions. I'm a person who's converted many times in my life through many different things. And so I would say first I admired the new atheists. Dawkins wanted to protect science, and so did I. Harris wanted to defend us from Islam and violence, and so did I. And Hitchens had a genius with his words, which I greatly admired. And so I became an atheist because I admired these people, and I would tell people that I am one of them because I admired them. Then I admired Peterson, his intellectual honesty, his jazz freestyle through the Western canon and science. And so I became Petersonian because I admired him, and I would tell people that I act as if God exists. That never flew with my friends too much, you know.
You didn't have the status to pull that off.
Yeah, not at all.
They're going to be like, what? What?
They're like, I don't know, my parents are Christian and they believe in the resurrection, Eric. Do you believe in the resurrection? This means, you know. But then finally, the reason how I converted is because I read the Gospels and I admired Jesus. And, you know, I wanted to, he moved my elephant, is how I'm trying to frame this. And so I became a Christian, you know what I mean? And so I began the process of converting, you know. So that's just a little, I want to get back to that at the end, but it's good to start with something and come back to it. So the idea is that you convert through admiration. So this really is like a quote from Maya Angelou. People will forget what you said and what you did, but they'll remember how you made them feel.
Yep.
It's a very good quote. So I want to talk about why I converted. And so as I mentioned in my last video, you know, I was nihilist and I was depressed and I needed a rock. And math was my rock. Math was what made me a man with a chest, as C.S. Lewis says it. It's when I talked about math, you know, I just, numbers exist. You know, it gave me this chest. But my trying to install the software of scientific materialism in order to solve the framing problem, it deflated my chest. And it started deflating my chest even about math, especially being in a PhD. You get imposter syndrome and you're like, oh man, maybe I'm not cut out for this. But mathematics kept me with a chest, you know, and so I needed something. Also, listening to Peterson talk about Carl Jung saying that we are, you know, subject to these inner forces, these sub-personalities that are conflicting with one another, I realized that I didn't want to be a pagan. I didn't want to be at the whims or mercy of gods who I didn't know. And I realized that I was not sufficient for this. You know, I needed something that was a little, you know, not in the here and now. And so I wanted to be a slave to a master of my own choosing, my own highest value. What was the top of the hierarchy for me? And that could be, well, at least I want myself in 20 years. You know, I could have that be my highest value. And that helps, you know, but as I would work this out, I realized that wasn't going to work. You need a transcendent value. So this is why I converted, was these things became apparent to me because of, you know, I was lost, but now I'm found, right? That's how they say it. And so this is why I converted, was, you know, I was in a place of desperation, and it's also related to Pascal's wager. I had nothing to lose, you know? And so I started to get some effects, you know? So I like to think of, like I was saying before, I'll talk a little bit more about this, because I spent a lot of time trying to tell people what it meant that I was converting. And now that Vervaeke has these lectures out, it's really helping with the language. So I would say, as he talks about, religion provides a solution to the framing problem. There's too much information. You need a way to interpret what's going on. And so when I would tell people that I was converting, what I was doing was trying to use the myths, right? And the way that we understand myths is these are events that happen all of the time in some eternal nature. The fall is happening all the time. The flood is happening all the time. And so I thought of conversion as reading the Bible and learning the myths. And the moral of the myth was the answer to that problem. I would, so for instance, I read the book of Job, and the way I thought about it was, what I'd like to do is install this software that tells me I'm in the myth of Job, I should act as Job acted. Or I'm in the myth of Cain and Abel right now, I should act as whatever the answer to the story was. So I thought of converting, at least in terms of just, installing software, and as I mentioned last time, converting really helped have these safety nets that I would fall through, that my rational mind could poke through, because it's always there. You can't unlearn what you know, and so I still have to be plagued by my own rational mind. But so what I was also doing by converting was I was uninstalling the bugs from my atheist software, because we live in a storyverse, but so there's Peterson's world of objects versus forum for action.
Yeah.
And you necessarily live in a forum for action, but atheism tries to convince yourself that you're in a place of objects.
Yeah.
And eventually that just causes stress. So I was trying to, uninstall these kinds of bugs.
Yeah.
And also just reading C.S. Lewis's Miracles helped to, he really got rid of a lot of the bad arguments that I fell for from my admiration.
That's exactly how Miracles works in me. I use it to get rid of a lot of bad arguments that I find they've just kind of accumulated in my head, and it's like, oh. And so reading Miracles just kind of says, okay, we can, we put a bunch of these things over here, and it'll creep back in again, and it's, we'll put them over here. So that's why I've read that book a number of times, because they just kind of, okay, let's put these things over here. That's where they belong. We know where they are. You stay there.
Yeah, absolutely. I can see why, because it's Satan or the devil always on your shoulder trying to poke at you, right? Also, one thing I really wanted to talk about was Tolstoy's Confession. Actually, I think was the most pertinent one for me, being in the same place as he was. I really appreciated, and I was tweeting about this when I was reading, because it was blowing my mind, how Tolstoy is like, I thought the answer would be in philosophy. If I just read enough philosophy, I would eventually reach the place where it would be done. I'd be in utopia because I found the answer. And no one has the answer. And that's the answer, is the philosophy. And so he looked at the people who he admired. And the people he admired were the peasants and the working class. And and he would talk about how he hated, or he was so jealous how easy it was for them.
Yeah.
To just, oh, Jesus, yeah, I'm in,
Yeah. And then suddenly you realize, well, maybe these philosophers don't have it so good, because, and you realize, and I love the way you phrased it, no one has the answer, and that's the answer, because right away you have a problem with this thing that you see. It's almost a faith in answers, and you begin to realize that, well, answers, as we know answers, well, answers can't save me. What do I mean by save? But answers can't save me. And so you look at the peasants and you realize, why do they have something I don't? And I've read all the philosophers, and they're not even necessarily looking for answers. And I've kind of, answers have taken up an idolatrous place in my heart. And so then I have them and I realize, oh my goodness, this answer is an idol. It isn't, it's binding me. It isn't saving me. So.
Absolutely. I like the way you put that. The answer became an idol. And also, what really helped push me with, or at least, give me more strength in my faith was how Tolstoy realized, I'm not special for realizing that life is meaningless. I'm pretty sure every human being throughout all of time has figured this out. This does not make me any better than these peasants. I'm pretty sure they see the futility.
That's right. It's the sophomore in the quad at his university. Life is meaningless. And it's like,
yeah. Welcome. Here we are.
Congratulations, you're a sophomore.
Yeah. But moreover, he realizes that his life of luxury, where he's able to self-defeat himself, is only made possible by the faith of others.
Yeah.
That's the thesis of the book, is that where there is life, there is faith. You can't have life without faith. And he wants life because he doesn't want to kill himself. So he's like, I gotta have faith.
That's really, really good. Now, you have notes for this? You're going to put them on a blog or something? I mean, I'm taking a lot of notes here, so it'll be in the notes from the thing, but I think you've really nicely laying this out. I think this is really good.
No, absolutely. I've been writing some notes right for the last half hour before this, trying to get my thoughts out. And I would seriously consider, this is very helpful for me. Just getting this all, I'm partly doing this because it's easier to talk than it is to write, as you do. Yeah.
Yep, that's true.
Absolutely. And so, Tolstoy found admiration, and that's what helped him convert. This is the thesis that I'm trying to work out here. And so part of my conversion was uninstalling these bugs, which I got by reading Lewis and Tolstoy and Chesterton. I actually bought Chesterton the day of the Zizek debate.
Really?
Friday, and they're talking about the crucifixion. Well, I gotta finally buy it. I've been meaning to get this book for a long time, but it was just too serendipitous. I felt like God was talking to me.
Where's your cat? Do you have a cat?
I have a cat. She's down here. Yeah.
Bring your cat up. We have to have the cat in the video. Hey there, kitty.
I'll have you know also that I've quit smoking and she's still alive. So this is
wonderful. Well, pets make videos better, so.
Absolutely. Every time. Yep. I need to let her out. She's But no, Chesterton is absolutely amazing. The Maniac, I have a friend who is the biggest nihilist in the world, and I recommended he read it, and I'm pretty sure he has. I'm going to talk to him soon, because it just seems like he's way too smart, for his own good. But the problem is you have to listen. Whenever I would try to say something, he had an answer. And it like started to make him upset that no one got him, but it's because no one listens long enough, I think.
Yeah. And that's part of what idols do too. Idols get in the way. Idols get in the way of wisdom. And you're exactly right. Wisdom comes through listening. And idols, if your answers are idols, they will get in the way of listening, because it's just click, 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 click. You go into refutation mode. Alan Jacobs talks about that in his book, How to Think. You just click into refutation mode, and then it's like, okay, well, there might be something in a refutation that other people can benefit from. Refutation isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it doesn't necessarily help you gain wisdom.
Yeah. And it's also annoying when you can tell someone's slipped into refutation mode. This is, I'm sure, a problem when you've heard all of your spouse's stories. And then you're like, oh, here we go, this one again.
Oh, marriage. Marriage is a space for, you can gain deep wisdom in marriage, but you can also avoid it.
Yeah. Very quickly. The last thing that I meant when I said I was converting, because in 2017, I posted on Facebook, I was converting to Christianity. So this is the part of here. And part of what I meant was I was finding elephants to follow. I started, well, I was watching your channel. I started watching, well, one is, somehow all of this got conflated into politics. You know, I was originally a libertarian when I was 18, but being in school, I just had all these liberal elephants around me. And so I just found myself navigating that way. But I've found myself to be a very strong philosophical conservative in this regards. And so it ends up a lot of these elephants are also conservative. And I would get, you know, like Steven Crowder is this political comedian, but he's also a Christian. And so I would listen to him, you know, I would follow him. I would follow Ben Shapiro's elephant because he's religious. I really respect listening to him when he talks about religion because he takes it so seriously. He has some status and authority here with the yarmulke on his head all the time. That I started, I got into Jonathan Pageau, I got into Rachel Fulton Brown, I got into Tim Keller, Bishop Barron, all of these people, and I started, you know, what really struck me was I heard a quote by Tim Keller, which I'm sure you could remember better. He said there are a certain 3 or 4 necessary conditions for conversion. One of them is you have to see people you admire who hold that position. Yeah. And that really, you know, that's the whole thesis that I'm trying to talk about here is that it's admiration that makes you convert. So that's what I meant by converting. So if you want to know how to convert, you're going to have to get steeped in this. You know, also Tim Keller says you have to have a certain amount of background knowledge that, you know, you have to be able to have an answer when people ask you questions.
Yep.
And so that's an important part. So now what's the difference, you know, because I would say now I think that I'm somewhat properly converted, you know, but it's hard to know when that moment was that I went from, you know, consciously trying to put, just for like therapy, you know, like I recommend everyone just try to be religious just for the therapeutic, you know, like Jordan Peterson says how the new atheists have completely disregarded the utilitarian psychological effects of having order, you know?
Yeah.
And so, you know, I was trying and, you know, I took up prayer. I say the Our Father, you know, and I was like, okay, Jesus said to pray like this. I can do this. He's the guy. So if he said to pray like this, so I memorized the Our Father and I say that. Sometimes I remember to say it right when I wake up and right before I go to bed and before I eat and just, but then I got into praying outside of recitation to really be asking to try and interact with God. Number 2, I also started trying to pray to Jesus and to pray to God and maybe try to pray to the Holy Spirit in different ways and ask each of them to offer what each of them can offer. And one form of prayer, I had a friend who was injured and I didn't know what to do. And I remember praying and I was like, I just want to do something. And all of a sudden, get a card just came out of nowhere. This Peterson sit on the edge of your bed and solemnly ask. And I was like, wow, I couldn't have come up with that. I don't buy cards for people. Where'd that come from? You know, I would never think to buy a card. Not even for my mom's birthday. I get her flowers and not a card, you know. So where did that come from? But I would say there were several different processes that led to me being converted. A lot of them one was understanding this idea that Jordan Peterson talks about, that if you just tell the truth, that's an adventure of a lifetime. You don't know where you're going to end up, and it's going to be scary if you commit yourself to the truth. And I started to understand that, you know, accepting the Lord Jesus Christ as your Savior, which I heard growing up in the denomination of Christianity that I was raised in summer camps. I was like, what does that mean? They all just say it so fast. But it meant, at least it meant to me that I need to just tell the truth, or at least don't lie. But then I think the final nail was I had to get enculturated. I had to learn enough, right? Because once you know enough, you can't once it's been seen, it can't be unseen. And I got to the point where I had read enough of the New Testament and the Old Testament, and just I understood Christianity symbolically very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
But at some point, I just had this idea in my head that you can't make this up. I used to have the arguments that, you know, Christianity exists as it does today because in 200 AD, Constantine created this government and religion via this organizational structure is what has preserved this. But, you know, as you get into Christianity, those aren't the arguments. That's not why we have Christianity. We have Christianity because a bunch of people claim to have seen him and were willing to die for it. You know, these are the real arguments. I also the conspiracy that this was cobbled together to control people, like the opiate. One, it's the opiate of the masses, but it's also to keep people in check and to control them. And I just, after reading it, I'm just like, this is not what you would do. You can't make this up.
Yeah.
Also, the Tom Holland N.T. Wright discussion, where it's like, this morality just sprang out of these letters from Paul. You don't get this anywhere else, you know? And so that's what revelation is, you know? It's, where did this come from? And so I realized that this was a conspiracy, and it's like, you can't make this up. The same way it comes from a math background, like you can't make up a sixth Platonic solid. There are only 5.
I don't know what that means.
It's the last thing that Euclid does in his book. So, for instance, a cube is, you take squares, and if you put 6 squares together, you get a cube. And so what 3-dimensional shapes can you make with using only a regular polygon, a fixed one? So, for instance, you can take a regular triangle and make a tetrahedron. Mm-hmm. And then there's the square. Then there's another one you can make with triangles with 8 sides. Then there's one you can make with pentagons, and there's one you can make with the dodecahedron you can make. And so there's only these 5. You can't do anymore, you know. You can't make this up, that there's only 5. It just somehow exists independent, you know. And coming from a math background, I just was like, you can't make this stuff up. The way all of the symbols go together, you know, it's arguable whether the prophecies in Daniel are fulfilled or the prophecies in Ezekiel, you know, but the fact, maybe you can contend one of them, but it just becomes this giant mesh, this giant web of, this was not, you know, I believe human beings were smart in the past, which is another reason that I was able to convert, was because religion is Bronze Age technology. It's like, they're just as smart as I am. You know, I had to get off my high horse and realize that everyone around me is like me in a fundamental way, and I'm not better than anyone. And so I believe people from 2,000 years ago were just as smart as me, but they're not this smart. Yeah. You know,
well, and there's actually reason to believe that in some ways they were smarter, because we're surrounded by, we have in a sense outsourced our storage into books and now into computers. And well, that's fine. I now know where to find things. But if I had even just a portion of this, and I do, of course, but if I had more of it, if I had a portion of this more stored in my head, it would probably help I would probably be smarter because I could draw on it rather than having to access it from a book. And that, which means that whole, even if I've read this stuff, I forget it. I can't integrate it. I don't process it. And so, they did, Jared Diamond talks about this in his book, Guns, Germs, and Steel, how, when he walks through, so he was studying Papua New Guinea, he walks through the jungle with these nationals, these natives who are walking through the jungle. They have just encyclopedias of knowledge in their head about their world that we don't have. And we don't, because in a sense, what we've done with our world is we've sort of simplified it and we've colonized it. And so in this very messy office of mine, this, even though this messy office is complex, and there's hosts of things in these books that I don't know, it's still nowhere near as complex as a rainforest. And it is very much, these books don't jump out and grab me. They don't bite me. They don't threaten my lives. I can't eat them. You know, we've taken this world and sort of, we've civilized it. You know, I love this. I think it's from the movie The Sunshine State, where early in the movie, you know, they're walking around the golf course, the guy's just admiring it, you know, nature on a leash. And we've taken all of nature and put it on leashes. And ancient people didn't have this. And so we feel ourselves superior because we have technology and smartphones, even though the vast majority of us, we don't know how our smartphone works. We don't know how, you know, it's taken this community, this civilization, but we don't recognize how fragile all of that is, that if in fact some of this knowledge is lost, and we don't realize how quickly we lose knowledge, you know, pretty quickly, we're going to have to do a lot of learning then. So no, you're exactly right. People in the past were very smart, and we don't give them the respect or the admiration that, quite frankly, they deserve. And the reason for that is our pride.
Absolutely. Yes. And for me, it was understanding this and seeing that it took Paul 14 years to figure this stuff out. And he had the Old Testament. He knew that stuff, you know, better than I probably know anything.
Yep.
You know, and so for him to finally put all the pieces together and say like, whoa, everything's come, you know, that it's understanding how, you know, they were smart, but they weren't smart enough. You know, the way I see it, I see the Gospels in a sense as kind of like science, because you're just taking down notes. You don't understand what you're doing. You're just writing down the data. Jesus said this. He said this. I don't know what this means, but we're going to let humanity over the next 2,000 years stare at the data and figure out what this means. They didn't know what the book of Revelation meant. You know, we don't know what the book of Revelation means, but well, certain denominations will tell you they do. But you know, the point is that I see the Gospels as more of just, this is what I saw, man. I don't know what any of this means. So to me, I see the Gospels that way, because I just find it very hard to believe that this was somehow constructed conspiratorially with a purpose in mind. Whatever the purpose is, I don't see this being this is not a worldly purpose. The way that in one of your last videos you talk about the miracles that Jesus does are not to gain power on earth now in the next 5 years. You know, they're pointing somewhere else.
Yeah. No, that's right. And first of all, our conspiracies tend to be really rather shallow, as you just pointed out. You know, we have conspiracies to get money or power or access or something, and they're usually pretty shallow, and they're usually pretty easily revealed.
Yeah.
You know, the disciples are leading a very strange con, given the fact that most of them died for their beliefs. And even someone like the Apostle Paul, I'll often mention to people that, you know, which life was better for the Apostle Paul, before or after his conversion? Before his conversion, he had the esteem and status and recognition and probably affirmation and admiration of his peers. And he was safely within his community, and, you know, he was doing his things. After his conversion, it's a mess. And I'm sure many people who knew the Apostle Paul before and after would say, why did you convert to that silly group of heretics that you yourself were persecuting? That makes no sense. Why don't you, you know, if Paul, I don't know if Paul's parents were alive by the, you know, in all of this, but it's, you know, a good mother would have said, Paul, stop this. You know, you had a weird experience on the road to Damascus. Maybe you ate something funny, you know, weird things happen, but just go back to your normal life. And he doesn't. And you'd have to say, why not? Now, again, people sometimes do counterproductive things. To be human is to be counterproductive in many ways. But Paul's story is not, I mean, usually when people do counterproductive things, again, they do it for pretty banal, easy to see reasons. And, like addiction. That's not, the kind of crazy that leads Paul to sing hymns while he's in stocks on the floor of a Philippian jail. I see a lot of crazy in my world. I got a lot of homeless people and a lot of people who struggle with mental illness. I see a lot of crazy. That's not the crazy I see.
Yeah.
It's very different. And it's something that's, as I think you said, well, something you admire. And you think, some of that crazy I could, use. So
Even if you disagree.
That's right. And that's, I love Steve Martin's movie, The Leap of Faith. And one of the things that Steve Martin says to, it's the story. Have you ever seen that movie?
No.
Steve Martin, Leap of Faith.
All right.
He plays a fraudulent faith healer. And at one of the towns he's blowing through, looking to make some money, looking for, easy sexual conquest, so on and so forth, a kid actually gets healed. And this really bothers him because he knows that he can really only play the con if he knows it's just all a load of BS.
Mm-hmm.
And so then when the kid is really healed and he knows it isn't him, and the kid's like, totally sincere, coming up to him saying, "You healed me." I didn't heal you. And that's it's a great movie. I'm
going to watch it.
Yeah.
That sounds good. Yeah, you can't lie to yourself.
Well, you can, but there's a heavy toll, and it tears. Peterson is right with this.
Yeah.
I mean, this don't lie is not just to other people. Don't lie to other people because don't lie to yourself, because lying to other people is costly. Lying to yourself is suicidal in a very slow, long way. So, yeah.
Very good. So now I consider myself fully converted, I think. And so I'm trying to figure out, what does it mean? And so one is that I'd say that I'm fully embedded, or at least my reflexes have changed. My friend sends me some collection of pictures where it's like Jesus is going down a water slide. Jesus is walking the line of sobriety with the police officer there. And my first instinct is to get rage and anger. And I'm like, that's my Lord you're talking about. I'm very personally affected by this. And so I'm like, okay, maybe something's happened to me, but actually I wrote, it was such a traumatic experience for me, because I have to follow my Lord and Savior. And I'm like, what would Jesus do, right? Like, that's another one of these safety nets that protects me from myself and my inhibitions. I wrote it down somewhere. Just my thought process of what I was going through. So first he sends me this picture, and my first reaction is anger. And I want to explain to him how this makes me angry by trying to make him angry, by saying, this is like if I said this about your mother, and so that's the first anger. I wanted to get even, but I realized that Jesus suffered far greater shame and humiliation than some Photoshops. It was nothing.
I gotta write that down.
Please steal from me. I was so pleased to see my picture at the New Zealand talk. I want to help. And if you've stolen from me, I'll know I've done something well.
That's a great. Jesus suffered far greater shame and humiliation than some Photoshops. That is a great line.
Yeah. But then I realized that these photos can't ridicule. You can't ridicule Jesus. You can't. And so this is really ridiculing me. I realized this is making fun of me because he is my Lord and Savior. And look at him. He's going down the slide, like, you follow this guy, and that doesn't help. It makes you angry too. But, it helps me understand why I'm angry, because I'm being made fun of by even, he wasn't trying to hurt my feelings. He just thought it was funny,
Right.
But I realized.
But then you have to pause and say, why did he think it was funny? And I think you're really onto something here, that you can't ridicule Jesus. There's a certain, so I was just talking to someone who we're setting up where we're going to do a conversation with him about the Jesus archetype. That's the frame that he used for it. But there's something about Jesus that you can't ridicule him, and because it doesn't take, and that's really strange. Jesus is anti-fragile in a way like that. There's another book, there's a book named Silence. Have you ever heard of it?
No.
They made a movie out of it. I haven't seen the movie. But it's a powerful book. It's about the de-Christianizing of Japan. Oh, come on. Is this the, I read it in seminary. See, the problem is there's a lot of books named Silence, and I need to find the right one.
Yeah.
And I can't. It's a Japanese author. The book is about, they made a movie on it. The book is about, so Christian missionaries are making inroads in Japan, and basically the powers that be decided it had to stop. And the way you would have people renounce Christ is you had this thing called a fumi. You can look it up on the internet. It's this image of Jesus, and you had to put your foot on the fumi. And so the book is about a monk who has gone to Japan to be a missionary, and they're going to kill and torture the people of the village unless he renounces. And it gets into this question about whether you can ridicule Jesus. And here's and it's just an amazing book, because Jesus points out to the monk, I came to this world to be ridiculed. It's hard to ridicule someone who opens his arms and says, go ahead, do your worst to me, beat me, strip me bare, expose me naked on a cross, spit at me, mock me, ridicule me. And as you do so, I will love you and save you. See, you just can't. Jesus he's beyond ridicule, and so people do it, and when they do it, suddenly in a sense the crucifixion begins to seep in, and someone ridiculing Jesus is closer to their conversion than they know. And in fact, if people really want to avoid Jesus, it would be much more like in the Flannery O'Connor, the great line from Flannery O'Connor about, I forget the guy's name, but he thought he could avoid Jesus by avoiding sin. That's a much smarter way to be safe from Jesus, is to try to hide in religion. If you think you're going to mock your way away from him, oh, that's dangerous. If you want to stay away from Jesus, don't try mocking him, because he's already walked that path. So it's powerful stuff.
It's really hard to put your finger on what it exactly is, other than the fact that he's Lord, right? Other than the fact that he is God, right? This is the divine. It's supernatural. It doesn't exist in this real world, something that can't be made fun of.
That's right.
Because you can make fun of anything.
That's right. That's right.
And so it points to some transcendental property of Jesus, at least the archetypal figure, if you will, of this ultimate laughingstock.
That's right. And I don't want to take this in a political way, but unlike the current resident of the White House, who is notoriously allergic and reactive to ridicule.
Yeah.
Jesus is completely unreactive to ridicule. Go ahead, mock me. And because Jesus knows that's the path by which he conquers. And it's always been the same for Jesus' followers. Go ahead, mock me, deride me. In fact, do worse. Take our possessions, take our freedom, take our lives, again and again. And so actually, the book Silence is a really haunting thing, because the church never really took hold in Japan after that. And the author, who is Japanese, wrestles with that in the book. But you get into this strange power of Jesus to be ridicule proof. And again, it doesn't mean people can't Photoshop, but what you said, see, Jesus suffered far greater shame and humiliation than some Photoshops. I mean,
yeah,
right there. That's good stuff. That's good stuff.
Absolutely. And so I realized that you can't ridicule him. And so they're meant to ridicule me, but Jesus tells me I will be ridiculed.
That's right.
And so it's like, okay, but that seems like something you would put in a religion, right? Like, oh, people are, any cult will tell you, hey, your friends are going to disown you for being in our cult, right? So that one you can, I understand that one. That one doesn't look too miraculous. He tells me I will be ridiculed and asks me to forgive. So okay, I gotta forgive. He's my Lord. Okay, I don't want to. But then I started to see, I used to traffic in these sacrilegious jokes and humor before I was a Christian. And so I see that he's just like I was. I'm just like him. I'm no better than him, because I know some pretty bad Jesus jokes. That I feel like, one thing that's weird that I don't take pleasure in is that converting to Christianity, I feel, has ruined a lot of humor for me.
Really?
And I just feel like I can't.
Change. Have you ever heard of a publication called the Wittenberg Door?
No, I know the Babylon Bee.
The publication called the Babylon Bee. Yeah, they're good. The Wittenberg Door. They were a magazine before the internet. They had a running column, dogs who love the Lord. And but it was an amazing magazine, because it was satire, it was humor. I mean, and one of the things I think Christians ought to be able to laugh at themselves. I really do, because some of what we do is just funny. And it's just stupid human tricks. It's part of, but one of the things, where did I hear this recently? When somebody who was just coming into the faith said he didn't know that Christians should be joyful. And that's exactly right. And, people often comment about, I laugh, and the laughter comes with freedom often. And one of my favorite things about Jonathan Peugeot is he'll be talking about something and he'll say something. He has this giggle he does, which just cracks me up. He'll be talking and he'll kind of laugh and go on. And sometimes it's in irreverent places. People have gotten upset at some of my videos because someone would say something to me and I'd laugh. But part of this is I've spent so much time in so many dark places. And one of the things you learn is that in so many dark places, laughter is just the light of God shining into a dark place. And I do the Freddie and Paul show, and people sometimes look at that and they wonder. There's lots of reasons that people sit and wonder about it, but part of my relationship with Freddie is, there's a lot of, he does not have a nice life and he struggles, but there are other times where he and we can just have fun. And one of the things that my father took from his long-standing ministry in the Black community, and in a Black community that was very much struggling and had tremendous difficulties, but that one of the things that I've always seen in the Black community is we just laugh, we have fun, and I saw that with the Haitians too. And it's like, the world can be so dark and so horrible, and God's like, yeah, but they can't banish, they're not going to banish humor. They're not going to banish the levity of laughter. That is just a gift from God. So Christians, the strange thing about Christianity is exactly what I said before with the Apostle Paul. By almost any measure, the conversion of Paul or Peter or James or John was a lifestyle mistake, but none of them would return it because of joy. And joy is not always, but joy is sometimes expressed in tears, but often expressed in laughter. And it's not shallow happiness. It's a strange, deep thing that Christ can give even in very dark places. So, and I think it's a deep part of the Christian life.
I think that definitely laughter and crying are the same reflex, just polar opposites of each other. There is, and I agree with what you're saying, but I think what I meant when I said that I find less things funny is that a lot of things that I found funny are at the expense of the less fortunate, so like pointing and laughing at people. And
I have a conscience now.
A bigger one. I've always had a conscience, but now
yeah.
There's still plenty to laugh at,
Yes, there is. Especially
people tripping is fine, so they don't get too hurt, But I will say, like, I had a very long discussion with a friend of mine who's a Catholic. When I was first getting into this, he was very quick. When I posted on Facebook, I'm converting to Christianity, he's like, let's have coffee. Let's talk. This is great. And I just had this 2 hours conversation with him over coffee, and I had this new profound admiration for him. And then I saw him trip walking down the stairs, and it made me realize, like, it's so humbling. This person that I admire, he still trips just like me.
Yes.
And it was warming.
Oh, that's good. That's good. We got a few minutes left. I don't know how far we made it through your notes.
Oh, quite a bit. I didn't have too much, so I've been filling in stuff to make sure that we. So another reason that I can tell that I've been converted, and that I don't just act. I do act as if, but act is synonymous with pretend, which is why Christians don't like saying that they act as if God exists. But all Christians do act as if God exists.
Yes.
And so I realize that I act as if God exists, and I've heard the testimonies of other members of yours where they have visions and they've seen angels, and they very clearly had God talk to them. And I rationalize this as I'm like Tolstoy. It's just harder for me, and you talk, some people have these, some people don't. But yeah. I've looked back and I've felt God talk to me. He's often telling me, get on your knees and pray right now. And I don't. But it's this absolutely overwhelming force that I'm deathly afraid of. It's a voice of conscience. It's a voice that's begging me to submission and humility and to accept grace.
Yeah.
And so I'm waiting for it to happen again. These things aren't always happening, but I'm pretty sure I'll be afraid then too. And so I'm trying to do the rituals so that maybe when that time comes that I'll bend the knee. But I've been spoken to by God, and I recognize it that way. And so I must be a Christian, but it's weird, pretty weird. Also, I have imposter syndrome, and so part of converting is you need the elephant. So I know what imposter syndrome is because I'm in a PhD program. The imposter syndrome is when you are deathly afraid that someday, somewhere in public, somebody will pull your pants down and prove you're not a mathematician. Or you're not the PhD in the field you wish. You don't feel like you are, and you feel like it's a con. You're conning everyone into thinking you're a mathematician, but you're not. And so you have this feeling of imposter syndrome. And it's easy for me to be a Christian around non-Christians. But when I'm around other Christians, I'm kind of like, uh-oh, are they going to, maybe I'm not a Christian. And so I really do have to get to a church. So I don't feel like an imposter. But this is how I know that I feel like this is a reason that I know that I'm a Christian now, is that I just am worried. It's just so ingrained, like I'm fully embedded in this. I don't know, because I've reached out with another mathematician that who's spoken with you. He's talked to me, and at first I was kind of apprehensive, like, uh-oh. He's like, I'm so interested in how you got to Jesus through math, and I'm like, oh, I hope I don't, disappoint this guy. Maybe I'm not. Like, I bet he is, but maybe I'm not. I don't know.
Yeah.
But after talking to him, it's fantastic. There's nothing to be there. But so yes, this is what it's been like for me to decide to convert, why I converted, how I converted, what converting was versus being converted, and all of this is a product of admiration. This is
very cool.
Wrap it up. Yeah.
Very good. I like this. I like this a lot. My new thing is that I'm taking lots of notes with this, and so I'll stick it all in the notes section. And I'm hoping what will happen is it'll help people find the talks on Google better if it's something on YouTube better if it's something that they're putting into the search engine or struggling with. So because I really do value these talks. Well, thank you, Eric. This has been a lot of fun. And good for you for the methodical way of thinking through this and taking your notes. And the one thing I would say is that your conversion is likely not complete because he will keep converting you bit by bit, and you're still young, so there'll be new gears and new ways that he converts you. And some of them will be difficult, but he, while we're alive in this world, he brings us into his image and into his likeness. And C.S. Lewis has a great illustration in Mere Christianity of the renovation of a house. Lewis says, when I converted, I thought Jesus was gonna, clean out the gutters and add a coat of paint. And before I knew it, he was taking down walls and knocking things down. And I was horrified because I just wanted Jesus to spruce up the cottage. And Lewis says, no, he was going to make me into the kind of home that would be fit for a king. And what that requires is some major renovation. And so what you learn is to trust him when he takes out walls and pours new footings, or all the crazy scary things that all the crazy scary ways that God renovates our lives. So
yes, I agree. This is something that comes with youth, probably, is wanting to be at the destination still. But this is why Jesus says he is the way. It's the process. He's not the destination.
Well, he is the destination too. Yeah. He's both. He's both the destination and the process. And so that's good. Well, thank you, Eric. This has, again, been delightful, and I will send this to you, and I think you probably do want to share it just by the way of it. But I'll have to check out some of the other talks on your channels because I like this stuff. So
it's good. It's called Meet a Mathematician, to show people what mathematicians are like.
Oh, cool. Well,
nothing too technical. And I'm also helping people sell their books.
That's a good thing. That's a good thing. All right, and I hope your move goes well, and you do land the job that you want, and relationship goes well with your parents, living with them again, and I just pray that God continues to move and bless you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Eric. Take care.
Have a great day, everyone.
Bye-bye.